بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمد ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم من يريد الله به خيرا يصب منه أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب زدني علما اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وصل على المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. Hadith number 15 in the chapter of Sabr, narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. Narrates from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has said, Man yuridillahu bi khayran, for any person, any being for whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends goodness. Yusud minhu, this person will be made to suffer some affliction, some difficulty from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In this hadith, there is great hope for the believers. Allah subhanahu Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said that whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends good for a person, the word mentioned in the hadith is the word khair. Now the word khair generally is translated as good, something physical, something which is real, something which an intelligent person, a sound person, he desires. It may be related to wealth, it may be related to his existence, it may be related to his family, wife, children, his belongings, respect, honor, any type of goodness. Generally, this is the word khair which is used for. So khair is the opposite of shar. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used the word khair in the Quran around 148 times for different things, for different reasons. In the hadith as well, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has used the word khair. For example, in the word khair is also used for the Islam itself. Islam is also khair. That Hudhayfah bin Yaman radiallahu anhu, he says that there was a time that where we were in the state of ignorance and evil, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought to us al-khair, meaning Islam. Like this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَفْعَلُوا الْخَيْرِ, that do something which is good. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he also tells us that hasten yourself, run towards goodness. وَيَسَارِعُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that you should compete in goodness. فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ, compete with each other in goodness. Then he also said that يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ, that there's a nation that calls people towards good. So the word khair has been used in different places in the Quran, in the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. So in this hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends good for somebody, when he intends good wealth, good health, good family, good life, and success in this world, and definitely success in the hereafter, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do? يُصِبُ مِنْهُ. يُصِبُ مِنْهُ means that an affliction will come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In one of the narration, the word is yusab minhu. So in the first one is yusib with a zir underneath a sad, and in the second another narration it comes with the word yusab minhu. Yusab minhu meaning that an affliction will come to this person. So in the first one, Allah will afflict him. In the second narration, an affliction and a difficulty will come to him. In both, the conclusion is the same, that a difficulty and a taklif, a challenge will come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in the word yusab minhu, there's a bit of respect for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who gives the difficulty and also removes the difficulty. To balance that out, there's both narrations. So in this hadith, there's a lot of hope for the believers, especially in order to exercise sabr. Now, how do you understand this? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants goodness from the person, but he puts him into a difficulty. So how does that make sense? Many and where you can understand this, these people, the footballers, for example, when they are training, they are woken up early in the morning. They're told to do their training early in the morning. They have a certain diet. Now, in one way, it seems like this, they are put through difficulty. They have restrictions. They are told to wake up early. They have to have certain diet. They are told to have, X and Y and Z. but it's in one aspect, it seems like it's difficulty, but the other aspect, if you look at it, khair, goodness is taken out from that person. Like this, sometimes you have in a classroom, that is a child is very intelligent. So the teacher, the head of the year, or the principal will put extra pressure on those students. So in one aspect, it seems that we are putting them in difficulty. We are torturing them. We are being harsh to them. But in the other aspect, if you look at it, the reason why this difficulty and these restrictions and this a lot of homework and extra hours and extra lessons is put there. Why? Because khayran. That the teacher and the principal want goodness from that person. So like this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He wants to put, when He does irada and intend good for somebody, He will afflict the person. Now the more you're closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, more difficulty that you will go through. The more taklif that you will go through. If you look at from the humans, the group of the Anbiya, the prophets, they went through the most. That Ayyub alayhi salatu wasalam went through such illness that even his own family members abandoned him and left him alone. That Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam was such that he was imprisoned. He was took away from his family, thrown into the well. Like this, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is made an orphan, born as an orphan. And even his own uncle is humiliating him in front of other people. His followers are being tortured. His Sahaba radhiyallahu anhum are tortured. So the more closer to you are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more taklif that we will go through. Now it seems like this is also unfair. That how is it that a person is more closer to Allah, is going through more taklif? The answer to that, and to understand that, is that this world, this life is very temporary. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't create us to live in this world. We are here for a very, very short period. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has preserved, has guaranteed something better, which is greater and for eternal. So in this short life, in this temporary world, a person, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts him through difficulty so that person may exercise patience, that person may come closer and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that person, for even a small taklif that he will go through. Sometimes it happens that we have a pen in our hand and we think, where's the pen gone? Or we have something in our hands, but we forget and we are searching for it. So that even that short taklif that we went through, even through that taklif that we will go through, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised many, many rewards for us. So the more closer you are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, more taklif that you will go through. Now, sometimes when you're going through taklif, you won't understand the bigger picture. For example, the story of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, and when he's traveling with Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam. Now, 3 occasions, Musa alayhi salatu wasalam is not understanding the actions and the doings of Hazrat Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam, that why is he put hole into the boat? Why has he killed his child? Why has he lifted this wall? Now, Musa alayhi salatu wasalam hasn't got the bigger picture at that time. But Hazrat Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam is gifted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that aspect, that he has a fast and he has better understanding in this aspect. So like this, sometimes we think that we're going through some taklif, we're going through some difficulty, and life seems unfair to us. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised something greater, something bigger, something better than what we are in currently. But remember, at the same time, that does not mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is evil. That does not mean Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants the humans to suffer. That does not mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one that wants to punish the people in this world. No, وَرَحْمَتِي وَسِعَتْ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. If you look at it, then the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is even greater. That even in that difficulty, there's khair in there. So that taklif is not evil. In actual fact, that evil is also good. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a bigger plan, has a bigger picture. And there's an ant on this Jamaat kind of example. He thinks that this is a big world. This is something great. But when you're standing on top of the dome and looking down, this carpet will seem very small to us. For the ant, this carpet will seem very big. This Jamaat Khana will seem very big. But the person who's looking from above will notice that the Jamaat Khana is very small. Like this, when you are going through some taklif, you think that this is something small and is constraining us and is bringing us through difficulty. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a bigger picture. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the greater view. So that for that we need to understand, and we need to take from this hadith that we have to bear patience and have sabr in every aspect of our life, in ta'at, in following the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It may seem difficult that why do I have to wake up early in the morning? Why do I have to dress in such a manner? Why do I have to follow certain rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Or why do I have to refrain from certain actions? Why do I have to refrain from certain places or from certain people? All of this in following the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His obedience, and also staying away from sins and any taklif that we have. In all three aspects, we have to have sabr, you have to be patient, we have to do something that which will please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to do something which will take us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Very temporary period, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised great rewards for this. Now this also brings it to a point where, yes, going through difficulty, a person will go through hardship, a person will go through some difficulty, and a person will go through some pressure on his mind. Mental health is an issue which is very, very common, which is becoming more and more common. But what we have to understand is that we have to deal in a certain way that we are able to stay stable, and at the same time stay firm on our deen, and at the same time we get closer and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A person, a believer, if he has Allah in the picture, in the formula, that he will be able to stay stable. A person who doesn't have iman, a person who doesn't have faith at all, when they go through difficulty, all they think is death. All they think is suicide. That's all that comes to their mind. Why? Because God is not in the formula. But a person who has any sort of belief in any God, especially a believer who has belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then in that difficulty, he has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the formula. He won't think of death. He will think of hope. He will think of reward. He will think of Jannat. He will think of the future. He will think of the hereafter. Like this, when a person has gone through difficulty, he will not say to Allah that I've gone through a big difficulty. Rather, he will say to the big difficulty that I have a greater Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the lesson, these are the few lessons that we learn from this hadith. Just to summarize, one point that we do learn, that any calamity that we will come through in our life, any difficulty, it will be difficult, it will be hard, it will be suffocating, but we have signs of hope, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants khair and goodness from us. And then what also we learn from this is that we have to have sabr in all through of our life. Now sometimes a person thinks that I'm not going through any hardship. My life is flourishing and I'm all good. Even in that there's a test. Even in that a person, why? Because either he'll have to do shukr or he'll have to do sabr. So when a person thinks that I'm free of difficulties, there's no difficulty in my wealth, there's no difficulty in my health, there's no difficulty in my belongings, there's no difficulty in my family members, nothing at all. I'm not going through any hardship. Even then, the person shouldn't be relaxed. Why? Because that's a time of shukr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing that does he do shukr or not. Why? Because if a person does do shukr, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase in that. But if a person doesn't do shukr, then that would become a means of taklif and a means of punishment for him in the hereafter. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us one of those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does intend good, and at the same time we understand the hal of our life. Alhamdulillah ala kulli hal. Every situation that we are in, we are going to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the ability to practice upon the points that we mentioned, and also grant us the correct type of sabr and shukr. Allahumma ameen. Subhanallah bihamdi. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati mimma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursalin. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahim.